Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on a new World Languages webinar as usual. Thank you very much for being here. Now we can officially start with this webinar, Teaching Mixed Level Classes, Strategies for Success in AP and Beyond. And for this session, we have three amazing presenters, Julianne Brooks, Laura Pearson, and Britt Marie Solis. They're going to introduce themselves. Ladies, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having us here today. We are going to be talking about some very specific things. We're going to obviously start telling you a little bit about who we are and the goals of today's session. We will then talk about a quick overview of mixed level classes. We will talk about strategies for success in mixed level classes. We will also talk about best practices for AP courses in mixed level classes. And we will do Q&A, conclusion, and final remarks. I would love to start by introducing myself. My name is Britt Marie Solis. I am a Western States sales representative with World Languages. I am a native speaker of Spanish, and I taught high school Spanish for 15 years. I was also an AP Spanish teacher for 11 of those 15 years, as well as an AP grader.
Good evening. My name is Laura Pearson, and I'm a sales rep within the Southeast region of the US. I'm located in Virginia, and I lived, both studied, and then taught English in France. And then for over 10 years, I taught French at the high school level here in Virginia. And for 8 of those years, I taught AP French. So I'm very excited to be here tonight to talk about mixed level classes.
Hi, everyone. I am Julianne Brooks, and I am a Midwest sales rep for CLET. I'm based in Chicago, and my background is being a French teacher. I have taught at both the higher ed and K-12 level. And I'm not a native French speaker, but I took AP French, so I was familiar with it as a student way back when. And one of the things that I bring to this is I have experience teaching these mixed level classes. I was the solo French teacher at a rural high school. And so I know what it's like when you're given levels 3, 4, and AP in the same class section. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
Today's goal are to talk about the following 4 things. We're going to talk about scaffolding instruction for students in different proficiency levels. We're going to talk about some very specific strategies to align AP and non-AP content. We're going to discuss how to incorporate flexible assessments, small group instructions, and project-based learning into your courses. And then finally, discuss some resources and materials that are designed to support multi-level classrooms. We're going to start with a question for the audience, which I believe maybe some of you have already shared a little bit about who you are and where you're from. We would also love to hear about whether or not you teach mixed levels of a language, and if so, which ones do you teach together? And also what resources you are using to prepare to teach mixed level classes.
Looks like we do have people from all over, which is wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Kauai. Okay.
So we have a mixed, got a 3, 4 in AP.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's many different options. Yet there's another, we see German 3 and AP coming from Washington State. There's many different iterations that this can happen. And yes, we see now German level 4 and AP.
5 and AP. Wow, quite a mix. It's hard. Oh, 3 honors, 4 honors, AP.
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah, 3 and 4, 5 and AP.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about where you're coming from and what you do and your types of mixed level classes. We will be having a couple of audience questions, so we're looking forward to hearing a little bit about your courses.
So now we're going to jump into looking really at mixed level classes, their prevalence, their benefits, and of course their drawbacks, which are, many. So the increase in multi-level instruction in the US schools are really driven by several factors. I'm sure many of which you know and are aware of, but this includes for some examples, declining student enrollments, reduced budgets for non-STEM subjects, and the competition by other advanced classes being scheduled concurrently. Additionally, teacher training programs often do not adequately prepare educators for the challenges of multi-level classrooms. It's really tricky. Most teacher prep and professional development programs, focus on traditional homogeneous classrooms where students are grouped by similar abilities. This limited focus creates difficulties for both new and experienced teachers in managing and effectively teaching diverse student groups. As a result, world language teachers in particular face the dilemma of either offering multi-level single period language classes or foregoing certain language offerings altogether.
So we know that there are, so we know that these mixed classes exist, and I'm assuming most of you are here because you're wondering how you're supposed to approach it. I remember, like I said, my first year of teaching when I was given my upper level class, which was the combination of French pre-AP, 3, 4, and AP. So the challenges, the first one that I wanted to point out is the challenges for teachers in that you already, as a world language teacher, probably have multiple preps. And if you're in a district or school that is using this mixed level scenario, you probably might be one of the only French or German teachers. So in addition to having multiple preps, you have within one class, multiple preps within multiple preps. That is all of the different preps that you want to do for your advanced level class. Um, Not only do you have this situation with having multiple preps, but you also kind of have a lack of administrative support and resources. There's a lot of PD out there and support available for a variety of world languages, but this specific topic is something that hasn't been covered much. And what I wanted to say too is that even if you have, for example, built into your schedule PLC time or planning time, you're still just given one planning period, despite the fact that you're using that one planning period for French 3, 4, and AP. And I keep saying French. This applies for any mixed level context. I just keep saying French because I'm going off my own background here. So you've got multiple preps. You don't have a lot of support. In the classroom, you're trying to keep the students engaged, challenged, and on task. And a lot of the times you find yourself either worrying that you're making this too easy and perhaps boring for your upper level students, or you're frustrating and overwhelming your lower level students. So the question is, how are you supposed to differentiate one resource when you're dealing with multiple populations of students? So those are the challenges for teachers. Students have their own challenges in this situation as well. Like I said, the beginner speakers might feel frustrated or overwhelmed, especially if you are using entire target language the whole time and your level threes arrive and they're like, what? Or the flip side is your advanced speakers might be bored, especially if you're recycling curriculum. They might have been exposed to some of the curriculum that you're dealing with. So you have these two different student groups that you're trying to keep happy. And then in the mixed level classroom, it's important to note that there's definitely a degree of self-guided learning. This is, students being expected to work somewhat independently since there's going to be different classroom groups. And sometimes students have difficulty with that. So there are a lot of challenges, but it's not all about the challenges. There are, believe it or not, some benefits to the mixed level classroom. And these benefits are what we're really going to try to hone in on today to get the most of the scenario that you've been given. So the first one that I want to point out is having this community. Those of you who are solo French or solo German or have a small language program, you know what this is like. This is where you get to have the same student multiple years in a row and watch their progression. Well, it's the same for students. They're in this learning community together. And whether this is, a 2-year alternating curriculum class or you trying to, have this combined class together, with the same curriculum. It's still students with their peers. Um, so you have this supportive learning community. And I actually wanted to point out, I included this, when we were researching this, I was Googling, what do people out there have to say about this? And I found this really sweet article from a student newspaper in which they discuss the mixed level class. And this one student, Kenta, who is a senior and French 5 student, says the following. She says, there's no challenges whatsoever from my point of view in being in a French 3, 4, and 5 class. You get to see yourself 2 years ago, which is pretty cool. And if it was just French 5, it would only be 3 people, which would be lonely. So I'm glad it's a mixed level class. She kind of touches upon the reality that if you want to offer that higher level class, you might only have the option of doing that combined level, but the students like the community. So we've talked about, what the students can kind of get from that intrinsically, but from a pedagogical standpoint, there's also a lot of benefits to this mixed level scenario as well, because you get the benefit of reviews and previews. So students in these styles of mixed level classes are getting more exposure overall from recycled learning and recycled vocabulary. So the students that are the lower levels are getting previews to higher level concepts, whereas the students in the higher levels are getting constantly reviews of things that they might have learned the last year, but it didn't quite stick. And I just want to share, with this concept of, for example, recycled vocabulary, there's a study that suggests that it might take learners more than 10 encounters of the same word to know what it means, how to spell it, and what context to use it. So that amount of exposure over a long period of time, say 1 or 2 or 3 years in the same class, can actually be really beneficial to students. The last thing I wanted to point out is these just the benefits in general that we know in education, the benefits to having heterogeneous student grouping. It's going to provide unique learning opportunities to students of all levels. So let's talk about how to reap these benefits, because it all looks good on paper, but what can you do in the classroom? So Laura, you want to take us to one of the first strategies?
I love it. Perfect segue. Thank you, Julianne. The first strategy we're going to look at is scaffolding, something I'm sure you are all familiar with, but we're going to really delve in to show you different ways that scaffolding can be used specifically in a mixed level world language classroom. So scaffolding in a mixed level classroom really supports learners by breaking complex language tasks into manageable steps, enabling students at different proficiency levels to build skills progressively through guided practice. It promotes confidence, encourages critical thinking, and ensures all students can actively engage with authentic, culturally rich content, regardless of where they are in their language learning journey. Here's some examples of scaffolding. Of course, there are many more, just a quick snippet and starting off with some pre-teaching vocabulary and key concepts, cultural contextualization, guided practice and peer collaboration, graphic organizers and visual supports, and task-based learning, and some of which we're actually going to show you tonight later on in the presentation. So I actually have an example over on the right-hand side of the screen, and this is from one of our new French books, Votre Francophone 4, which comes out next month. And I love this article because it allows for a lot of really great differentiation and scaffolding to take place. So in this article, students are going to have to interpret the article, which in itself is hard for students, hard for a teenager to grasp, but they're going to have to interpret an article about a secondhand clothing market in Senegal. A great way to scaffold is by giving them some definitions. You can see over on the right-hand side in the green that some definitions are given, but you can scaffold by giving the English definitions or definitions in the target language. And this is a great way to provide that easy differentiation for AP and non-AP students that doesn't require a lot of prep. It's just a great way for them to have a base as they read so they know they're reading about. Some other ways, and this is kind of continuing on with that same article, just some additional ways, different scaffolding activities that can be used with readings. Again, this can all be used with both AP and non-AP students. The first is going to be observing and describing a photo that accompanies an article. It's a great pre-reading strategy, a great way for students to identify what, where, why, what is going on and what they're about to delve into another language. The second is making an inference about the title and introduction. That's super easy. That requires no prep whatsoever, but it's a great way for students to understand, okay, what could the article potentially be about, using some prior knowledge, really jumping into the language a little bit if they can. The third, excuse me, is diving deeper into new vocabulary, asking students to scan the article to find specific words you've previously identified. Students have to then determine their meaning of each using background knowledge, cognates, context. Great pre-reading strategy there. Then after all those really simple strategies are put into place, the students can then dive into the text. You're setting them up for success by allowing them to really understand the content at a little bit of a different level so they understand potentially, what they're going to be reading. So after they read the text, another good strategy here is association. After reading the text, they can match a particular person, a place, or an item with a description, a little bit of that check, see what they understood. Now, I like to mention too here that all of these can be done individually or with partners. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to scaffolding. I always like to end interpretive solo work with partner work. I think it's a great way for partners to bring different pieces of the puzzle to the table, really fit in what they've learned. It's a great way too for students to kind of show their worth and give them some onus there. And then to go even further, groups. I love group work. I know it can be tricky at times, but this is another great way, especially with a mixed level class, where you could mix students from an AP or non-AP section and mix them together, or maybe you split and give them separate questions. There's a lot of different ways to go about it there. But I love the idea of solo, partner, group, allowing them to grow each time. And then you can even push AP students further. And we have an example on the slide where you can have them research a particular topic tied to the article's subject or theme, take one of the AP themes, and then present their findings to the class. In this particular example, you see in the center, students have to research different currencies. It's a great extension, very appropriate for the theme and topic, but it also practices valuable AP presentational skills. So you're kind of doing the whole umbrella. You're getting them to practice interpretive work, presentational, there's some writing, some reading. And I do want to emphasize, it doesn't just have to be, from one particular text. You could take an article that you've used for years and apply any of these strategies. So I highly suggest, I realize for many of you, it's the end of the year, but I do highly suggest trying out even 2, 3 of these to see if they make a difference in that mixed level setting.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, the scaffolding is always one of those things that you know that you're supposed to do, but it's kind of hard to figure out the best way to do that in the mixed level in the language class in general. So now that Laura has given us these ideas of scaffolding, we still have the central idea to discuss, which is how to teach to 2 separate groups at the same time without making a clone of yourself. The goal is to reap the benefits that we talked about. So we want to challenge our more advanced proficiency students while accommodating and scaffolding the lower levels. We want to prepare the students who are maybe signed up to take the AP exam, but not enrolled in an AP class because your school's not able to offer a standalone AP class, but you don't want to turn your class into a teach to the test scenario that bores the non-AP students. This is differentiation 101. And while this is a concept that teachers of all subject areas are increasingly familiar with, its application in the world language classroom can be a bit nebulous. So I'm going to walk you through a few different lesson planning ideas that we came up with of how to differentiate your mixed level classroom instruction. So let's say in practice on the ground, you have this mixed level and you're working with a single resource. This resource is probably either A, not challenging enough for the students with higher levels of proficiency and or not preparing your AP students properly for an AP exam, or the resource in question is too challenging for the average proficiency of the class. We're going to talk about both of these scenarios, and I'd like to start with what I think is the most common, which is exploring how to leverage a resource that you have to both prepare your AP students for the exam, but still not be teaching an AP specific class. What is it you're trying to do? Well, essentially, you want to play it up. You want to increase the rigor of your level 4 textbook for your
Sorry.
students planning to, you're fine, for your students planning to take the AP exam, but without offering a standalone AP class. And so, yes, here we are. Like I said, I was going to go over a few different lesson plan ideas of how to incorporate AP preparation into the mixed level classroom. And what do I mean by AP preparation? I'm talking about AP stimuli, which is essentially all of the things, all of the authentic resources that AP students are engaging with. And hopefully, as a teacher, maybe you've been using authentic resources since level 1. If you haven't, I'll show you how. You also are going to be, the other thing is the AP task models. This is essentially some of the things that the students might be doing on the AP exam, whether it's that email reply, simulated conversation, you name it. And then, of course, all of the AP themes, the 6 AP themes. So today, I'm going to be primarily using examples from level 4 of our Reporters series, which you'll see pictured here. It's our most popular high school series that aligns Spanish, French, German, and Italian. Level 4 for Reporteros is already out. And then level 4 for Reporter Francophone is coming out next month. And then Das Reporter Team 4 will be coming out next year. And I don't have a picture of it, but we also have Giovanni Reporter for Italian coming out. So level 4 of this series is specifically adapted as a pathway to AP because its content aligns contextually to the 6 major AP themes. And all of the stimuli are the types of authentic resources that are expected of students to use on the AP exam. The assessment program is still task-based, but it starts incorporating a lot of those AP task models that prepare them for a higher level of proficiency. So while the Reporter's level 4 book, whether it's Reporteros or Reporter Francophone, while it is not an official College Board AP preparation book, its scope and sequence keeps in mind this reality of the combined class. So it's perfect for schools that might offer multi-level courses that combine, the French 4 and AP French students in the same class, or students that sequence their AP students to enroll in their AP class directly out of level 3. So it would go, for example, German 1, German 2, German 3, AP German, kind of skipping that 4th level. So let's look at some lesson planning ideas. I'll use, just as a quick intro, I'll use a few different flowcharts in these next few slides to kind of outline what a lesson plan could look like. And since this is part of our AP webinar series, I'm dividing my 2 student groups into non-AP and AP students. But at the end of the day, these differentiation techniques can be applied in any of the mixed proficiency population scenarios. And even though I am using examples from our textbooks, these types of differentiation strategies can be applied across the board. So for instance, you've got this first example, and it's a general strategy that can be applied to a variety of stimuli and not just in the AP context. So it's essentially a question of, is it possible to have students of multiple different varying proficiencies engaging with the same authentic resource? The answer is yes. So here for this lesson, let's say we have a stimulus that is a video presentation. Essentially, this is oral comprehension. This video is one of the intro videos from the Reporters series. It's Ousmane from Dakar, Senegal, a real life teenager who's kind of giving like a 2 or 3 minute video explaining, who he is, where he's from, in an authentic Senegalese accent. So we've got this video, and it might be a little rigorous for your non-AP students. Everybody knows when you present an authentic resource in the target language, the first instinct of students, especially if it's the beginning of the school year, is to freak out because it's entirely in French and oh my gosh. So how can you scaffold for some of those students? Well, first of all, you can provide a video script for the second viewing. We all know that having that to follow along with can be really helpful with facilitating some of that comprehension. And then, to engage with this video, you can, for the non-AP students, give them an interpretive listening activity. This might just be a worksheet in which they are filling in information, filling in the blanks with some of the things that Ousmane talks about in the video. So you're scaffolding it for your non-AP students. What if you want to make it into an AP style task for your AP students? Well, while the non-AP students might be working on some sort of interpretive listening activity, you can have your AP students engage in interpersonal speaking. Maybe they can discuss some of the things that Usman had talked about in his video. And then to take it a step further, you can even give them a task model. The cultural comparisons is a great one, and it is, I think, suggested in the annotated teacher's edition of Reporter francophone 4. This is a follow-up question, the cultural comparison of what follow-up questions could you ask Usman about his life in Dakar? So it's a little bit higher level thinking, higher level critical thinking, engaging with this resource. Whereas your lower level students might be doing some heavily scaffolded techniques, just like Laura described previously. So the key takeaway for this, style of a lesson is that one, it demonstrates that there are multiple applications that you can get from the same authentic resource. And two, one level's interpretive listening activity could be another level's interpersonal speaking activity or presentational speaking activity. You can engage in the 3 C's in different ways depending on the rigor of the resource. So that's kind of our first option of one way that we can take a few different paths. Let's look at the next one. Thank you. Yes, so here we see another situation in which we are once again working as a class, um, with the same authentic resource. This time, instead of it being a listening resource, this is a written resource. And we're going to be engaging with this in a few different options of activities. So the authentic resource in question is actually an article from, and it has the watermark on there because this is from our not yet published Reporter francophone 4. This is an activity in which, an article from a Canadian newspaper explaining the prevalence or essentially explaining the language laws in Quebec. French teachers and people who are not familiar with that situation, this is essentially in Quebec, they have certain laws to protect the use of language or the use of the French language to keep it from being heavily anglicized. So this is an article that is authentic from a Canadian newspaper. And for the non-AP students, in order to help them understand some of this article, you have a glossary that you can give them. And it's up to you, the teacher, how much of a glossary you want to give them. One thing that I always liked to do as a teacher as well is I would project this on the board. And as a warm-up activity, I would say, come up to the board and circle all of the cognates that you see, because it's kind of a good way to get those gears going for the lower level students, that there's a lot of cognates, at least between French and English, that they might not realize. So that's how you're scaffolding for the non-AP students. Then let's say the activity that you want them to do to engage with this article is once again more of an interpretive reading activity. So for example, in our book, I have a little screenshot here of guided questions. It's essentially saying, please justify these sentences with evidence from the article. And what I like about this is without realizing it, the non-AP students are doing those pre-writing steps that AP students are going to be needing to do, whether this is actually annotating the article or at least being able to skim critically to find information that goes with what they're trying to do. So while you have your non-AP students, heavily scaffolded and maybe just engaging in a, matching, being provided sentences that they just need to kind of back up with evidence from the articles, let's engage the AP students. So maybe the AP students can discuss with a partner whether the US has ads in other languages as well. The crux of this article is talking about the use of English in Quebecois advertisements. What would be the benefits or drawbacks of that? Can you think of examples in the US, for example, where there might be the use of Spanish or maybe even French? So that's kind of a way to, once again, take this to a level where they're engaging with a little bit higher critical thinking. And then their task, for example, could be the free response argumentative essay. For example, this one is actually one of the questions that was on an AP exam. It's, are language laws necessary to protect French identity in Quebec? So like I said, the non-AP students are already kind of skimming and annotating the article, trying to find out, trying to justify the sentences that are given. The AP students are taking that a step further and maybe practicing the beginning of an argument and essay. So there is, between this slide and the last slide, those are a couple of examples of how you can use the same resource and kind of go in two different directions for both populations. Let's take a look at this next example. Okay, so another common AP stimulus, and something that is what you're wanting your higher level and especially AP students to do, is the synthesis or synthèse. You're wanting your AP students to synthesize to authentic resources, because that is one of the things that they need to do for the AP exam. For example, they might have an article and a video, or in the case of the AP exam, an audio recording, and they have to combine information from both of these to engage with the multiple choice questions or whatever. So here in this lesson, the students are doing the exact same thing. So here we have an article on the left, which is a top 10 list by the House of Switzerland, which is an actual unit of the Swiss government's Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. It's addressing all of the Swiss cliches. And other cliches from the original list include how many people confuse Switzerland with Sweden, or the notion that all Swiss people yodel. It's pretty funny. So you have this article, and then you have this video from Radio Télévision Suisse, which is a video series produced by essentially Switzerland's version of PBS. And it became popular on YouTube during lockdown. So it's where this popular French comedian, David Castello Lopez, explores Swiss stereotypes. So what's kind of fun is that, first of all, this activity is really funny. It goes over stereotypes, and that's always a really fun thing to do, at least in the French class, but across all of the languages. So everyone is working with the same two resources, and this time we're going to have everybody do the same activity. The AP task model of the multiple choice, print, and audio. This is a large portion of the AP exam in which the students are, once again, having to synthesize information from two resources and answer multiple choice questions about it. So the way that I have this, one of the ideas that we came up with was, how can you scaffold, for example, this video that is pretty quick French for your lower level students? You can give them one of those dictées. I'm not sure how popular dictées are in the other languages, but I can tell you they're popular in French. The idea is it's a dictation exercise in which students are listening to a recording or whatever, and they're writing in, filling in the blanks as a way to kind of help them either not just learn spelling, but also just kind of learn different words. So you could turn the video into a dictée activity to help your students, help the lower level students maybe with, that close listening. And then when it comes time to do the AP task models, you can give them the exact same questions that you're going to give the AP students, but this time tell them they can choose 7 of the 10 AP questions to answer. It takes the pressure off whenever they get to kind of pick and choose, and just based on cognates alone, maybe they can work with a partner if they feel particularly stressed about it, but just cheering the assignment with the same materials is just a great way to differentiate. So you've got your AP students, scaffolded and maybe doing part of the non-AP students scaffolded and doing part of the assignments. For the AP students, you can turn it into a proper AP prep, the one where it's, let's preview and skim the questions. Now you listen to the audio only twice, engaging them that way. So now that everybody's done the same activity and it's time to come together as a class to go over the answers, one thing that I came up with when I was a teacher, and I really enjoyed it, and the students did too, is what I like to call the reverse tutor approach. It's where you're taking that class culture a step further, and you are allowing your lower level students to provide the answers to the upper level students. So essentially, when you're going over the answers as a class, the lower level students or non-AP students have that dictée that I told you about. So they already have a script in front of them, and they are able to assist their AP classmates with the dictées. So it can either be just assisting, you can even give it a step further and let your lower level students actually provide the answers. It might seem small, but it really is a way that makes those lower proficiency level students feel kind of empowered because they get to give the answers to the AP students. So that's kind of a way that you can have everybody doing the same activity and just kind of differentiating and heavily scaffolding for the non-AP students. All right, let's look at I got one more strategy for you all, at least in this context. So this here is the famous email response that has been on the AP exam since I don't know how long. So here in this activity, we are once again all working with the same resource. The resource is a letter or an email, essentially. And so this email in particular is, this example is actually from level 4 of Reporteros. I've been including a lot of French examples, and I didn't want to leave the others left out. So this is, for example, let's say you teach Spanish 4 and AP in the same classroom, and you're wanting to use Reporteros Cuatro as your resource. So in any case, you have this letter or email, and not only do you have students all working with the same email, you can even give them all the same pre-writing activity. Printing out a copy and having students annotate together goes a really long way because it helps students learn those important steps of really diving into a text. You can even put them in pairs where you have the non-AP and AP students annotating, because that way the non-AP students get to see what exactly the AP students are annotating. So it's kind of something that they can do together. So now that you've done this pre-writing activity, you can kind of separate a little bit how you're going to proceed. So you can, for example, give some guided questions, once again, for close reading for the non-AP students. Or actually, no, let me back up. Everybody gets the guided questions. So all the students are working in pairs. They've annotated this together, and they are doing the guided questions for close reading together. Now, here's where it splits off. For your non-AP students, you can do a gamified sorting activity that will help build the scaffold for their AP peers. What do I mean exactly? So you'll see down here at the bottom, there is an example of kind of the scaffold for the email reply that your students are going to want to make, or that your AP students are going to do. You'll see in little brackets, it has these verbs. One asterisk I'll say about these verbs is these verbs are the types of verbs that also appear in the simulated conversation. It's the verbs that say describe, give evidence, present, say thank you. Any of these types of task words that students are expected to know when doing the AP exam. So what you can do with your non-AP students is you could provide examples of each of the bracketed categories. For example, for the presentarse, multiple examples of, maybe 3 or 4 sentences of how you could present yourself. Then once you have them on separate sheets of paper, you can, for example, have them have on the board these different categories, and students, your non-AP students, are going up to the board and taping or writing or whatever, they're sorting these different examples into their categories. Essentially, the non-AP students are not creating language, they're sorting language to hopefully, acquire through the course of their learning. The AP students will then get to use the scaffold that your non-AP students are creating to build their pre-response email reply. So the non-AP students, once again, are kind of sorting these different examples of, presenting, giving evidence, whereas the AP students are given these examples, but now they are expected to take it to the next level and actually compose the email. So this is just another example of how you can have the same AP type stimulus and really playing it down for your non-AP students and really turning it into AP prep for your AP students. So we've talked a lot about the different scenarios of differentiating your instruction when working with an AP official resource. Britt Marie, if you'll take us to the next slide. Thank you. So all of the examples I gave prior were what it would be like to be teaching to a mixed group of AP and non-AP students, and you do not have an AP resource. You don't have a College Board official AP resource, and so you're just trying to incorporate that AP test prep. Well, let's look at another scenario of mixed level classes. What if you have a mixed level of AP and non-AP, but actually the AP students outnumber the non-AP students, and so you've decided to adopt an AP official resource? So today, for this next example, I'll show an example from our brand new Generación AP, which we're very excited about. It's releasing next month. We're excited about it because the book follows thematic units. So it kind of has that structure rather than just providing various task scenarios. So it's really following the structure of, the lower level textbook series, but it's an AP prep book. So you're using this resource, but you have a mixed population. What do? Well, you play it down. You've decided to use an AP resource for all of your students, perhaps a pre-AP scenario. Maybe you have a combination of AP and pre-AP students in the same class. This is just another way of describing, level 3 and 4 for an AP. It's the same situation. It's a mixed level class. So we're going to talk about how maybe we can heavily scaffold or tone down AP activities so that all your students can effectively learn. So if you look at this example, here we have a 2-page spread of one of the lessons in Unit 3 of Generación AP, where the end goal is to practice that ever-confusing simulated conversation, including those verbs that I had mentioned previously that your AP students need to know, because they're kind of like those action words that are going to come up on the AP exam. So I'll show you how to effectively chunk this activity and provide these differentiation options for a mixed level class. So if you look at this next slide, we have, once again, the AP task model at hand is the simulated conversation. So everyone can prepare for this task together. Your non-AP students and your AP students can all work together to organizate, to essentially organize their thoughts, and especially with these buzzwords. So you'll see here the list of the various buzzwords that come up with the simulated conversation, whether it's expressing preferences, giving clarification, reaction, connecting ideas. So together, your students can brainstorm what these could look like. Now, here's how you can turn this into a mixed level class scenario. Your AP students might be doing the simulated conversation, but maybe your non-AP students aren't ready. Instead, you can actually adapt any simulated activity into a guided conversation activity. So instead, rather than it being one student interacting with a recording, it's two students interacting together, and they're following a conversation guide that evokes the same conversation as the audio recording. For the simulated conversation, with your AP students, you're still going over it, you're still scaffolding it by checking for understanding, dissecting the prompts, discussing strategies. And, for practice, you can give students 2 attempts. It kind of depends on how far into the school year you are. If it's at the beginning of the school year, maybe you're heavily scaffolding it. If it's towards the end of the school year, maybe you're starting to really incorporate that AP practice. So if you look at this next slide, what I like about it is this is essentially how you can, what the difference between a guided conversation and simulated conversation looks like. So on the right, we have a simulated conversation from Generación AP, and I see now that I did not include the page number. I apologize. With this example from Generación AP, once again, it is you and Ruben who are having this conversation together, and those are the little tasks that are given. With the guided conversation, this is your activity where you have persona A and persona B. And maybe these tasks are cued in English. Later in the semester, maybe they are cued in the target language. What I like is that I actually got this idea from just researching this topic. So this is just a teacher created activity that I found on Google. But in looking through this, it actually is not. It is not a huge ask to adapt a simulated conversation for your pre-AP or lower level students, because essentially you're taking the simulated conversation between Ruben and Tu, and you're just changing it to person A and person B. Now you're going to have to add a little bit more information so that it actually makes sense as an activity. But sometimes that just requires just one extra sentence or maybe some tweaking or rewording. That way the students are getting interpersonal practice. Everyone's getting interpersonal practice, but maybe your pre-AP students are not quite ready for that simulated conversation. So that concludes my many flowcharts of differentiated instruction. There's a lot of different ideas, and like I said, these different differentiated instruction ideas can be applied in multiple contexts, in multiple classrooms, with multiple textbooks. So I hope that, my flowcharts made some sort of sense. And so I think what we need to talk about now is one of the most important strategies of the mixed level classroom, which is creating, like I said, that sense of a classroom community. So Britt Marie is going to talk to us a little bit about how one could create a supportive classroom environment.
Yes, pretty much everything that Julianne talked about today is going to require all of us as teachers to make sure that we have that supportive classroom environment. Otherwise, all of those groupings, all of those different things that you're doing with these students, they're not going to work, or they might not work as well. So we're going to talk about first, why is that supportive classroom important in a mixed level course? First, it is the way for us to encourage risk taking. Our students are not going to step out of their comfort zone if they are not feeling supported and encouraged by their peers and their teacher. The second thing is it's going to boost confidence. If we are, as teachers, supporting our students, that's going to mean that they're going to be more likely, no matter their level, to use the target language without being fearful of being judged. It also is going to support differentiation. I mean, Julianne just talked to us about the importance of differentiation in the classroom. A supportive classroom is supported by differentiation, and it supports differentiation. And last but not least, collaboration. We saw a lot of her examples are leaning into that idea of students working together. We know it's a 21st century skill. We know it's something that we want students to be doing actively. So it is something that we need to ask of our students, because it's going to lead to that supportive classroom environment. What are some key strategies for a supportive classroom? First is establishing a collaborative classroom culture. Activities that can lead to this particular piece are things such as jigsaw groups, think, pair, share, gallery walks, etc. Giving opportunities for low stake practices can be accomplished by giving students activities like graphic organizers, again, think, pair, share, ungraded quizzes. Also, using formative assessments and peer mentoring opportunities are going to help us create supportive classrooms. And notice that I have highlighted a few things in green. Those are going to be the pieces that I will focus on in the next couple of slides. And there will be examples from Reporteros 4, Reporter Francophone CAFA, and Generación AP. If we want to establish a safe, collaborative classroom culture, we need to make sure that students are doing activities such as a jigsaw reading group. Why? An activity like this one, which most of us are familiar with, is going to increase student engagement. It's going to make students active participants of their learning process. The second thing is they're going to be an opportunity for peer support. We know that that piece is crucial for that collaborative and that safe environment. We want students to work with students that are of varying levels so that they can support each other, as Julianne mentioned earlier. Jigsaw reading groups are also a differentiation strategy because they are working with content, but it is chunked and it's a little bit more accessible. And it is finally a collaborative learning activity, and it's going to encourage those social interactions that are going to make a true community. In this example, from Generación AP, students are learning about Federico Garcia Lorca. As you can see, it's a rather long piece of reading that they have to do. So the annotated teacher's edition is suggesting that we do a jigsaw reading. I would take this reading, divide it into pieces, make groups, have groups focus on one particular section of the reading, and then break those groups to make new groups that are made up of each part of the reading, and then have each of those members explain to each other what is it that they read, what happened, what's important. And so at the end, every student will know what the reading is about necessarily without having read it, which is wonderful. Another example, similar to jigsaw readings, are gallery walks. They're also going to help us create a collaborative classroom culture because they are going to promote active participation. My favorite thing is that they're going to allow for movement. We don't want necessarily our students, even at the higher levels or mixed level courses, to be sitting for 50 or 60 or 90 minutes. We want them to get up, move around, interact with each other. They're going to provide also an authentic audience and a purpose for the activity because they know what they are doing is going to end up in a gallery and there's going to be an audience, and that audience is their peers. And finally, it's going to allow students with different levels of understanding to support each other during discussion. So in this particular example from Reporteros 4, students are describing habits that specific people have, and they are writing short descriptions for these different people. The annotated teacher's edition is suggesting that gallery walk. It's having students showcase those descriptions, having their peers read them, and then talk about what do they agree with, what's similar, what's different, practicing that comparison and contrasting, but also creating that idea of community while you're doing this activity. Graphic organizers are a great idea for low stakes opportunity for practice. Remember, that's the category that included ungraded quizzes. Graphic organizers are going to help students promote discussion, also collaborate with each other, especially if you have them share their graphic organizer at the end of the activity. They also are going to help clarify relationship between concepts. They're going to promote our students' cognitive processing. And my favorite thing is graphic organizers are crucial when it comes to the AP exam. We know students need them for the free response questions, for the essay, for the cultural comparison, even sometimes for the email, a graphic organizer is something really good to have in your back pocket. So let's have our students practice with different types of graphic organizers throughout their time in our mixed level courses so that they can be extra prepared when the time comes for them to take an AP exam. In this particular example, we have an infography from Reporter Francophone Tapa, and then a short reading. So the annotated teacher's edition is suggesting that students create a table with 3 columns to capture information from all of the different stimulus so that they can then find the information they need to produce that comparison or that justifying paragraph on an argumentative essay. Another way of creating a supportive classroom environment is fostering peer mentoring. We are in a mixed level class, so peer assessment rubrics are going to be a great way to create those opportunities for peer mentoring. Students giving feedback to students lowers the affective filter. This type of activity is going to make our students more empathetic. So non-AP, AP, they're going to find, a little bit of common ground. The non-AP students have something to look forward to. The AP students can kind of look back at, this is where I was a year ago, like that student said at the beginning of the presentation. And it is also going to model real world communication for our students. Formative assessments are going to help our students build confidence. This is one of my favorite type of formative assessments, and it's the traffic lights. And this example is taken from Reporteros 4. It is one of my progress sheets, and the only thing that I did is I'm going to change the emojis for the colors of a stoplight, and it's going to be a quick knowledge check using the can-do statements from the chapter so that students can tell me if they're feeling really comfortable with something. If they're at a yellow, which means they're kind of in between, yes, I get it, but maybe I need a little bit more practice. Or the red, is they really need help. This is something that you can easily do, but turn it into a pear deck, or you can have your students do it with dry erase boards. You could turn it into a 4 corners activity, but maybe it's just 3 corners, one for each of the colors and a stoplight. And it's a really great way for us to get immediate feedback as teachers.
So much great information. Oh, I love it. So we're moving on to the last focus for this evening, which is going to be assessments. And we wanted to start off, though, by giving the audience a chance to express what type of assessments work best in a mixed level classroom. What have you experienced? What have you find to be really powerful? We always find that, sharing ideas is really great and really special. So we'd love to hear what you have to say before Britt Marie continues on talking about assessments. All right. We have guest certification, podcast presentations. Ooh, that's fun.
Like
I
that.
like that. Yeah, that's really cool. And just you can do so much with that. Very creative. All right, we're
We've
going to
been
continue on
talking
for
about
time's sake. Oh, sorry, Marie.
Yeah, we've been talking about
Save it.
differentiation for quite a bit of today's webinar. And another important differentiation piece of our courses, especially in mixed level classes, should include the differentiation of assessments. And the reason behind that is that differentiating assessments is going to allow students to show us how they're growing, their strengths, and also how they learn. This is an example from Reporteros 4. The essential question that students have been working with is, how do scientific and technological innovations change environmental and health conditions? And instead of your normal AP type question, it's utilizing a project format for students to share their learning. A project still incorporates AP skills and preparations. We are asking students to create a podcast about the most interesting innovation of the last decade. So our students are going to collaborate, they're going to research, they're going to create, while also practicing very important AP skills like critical thinking, interpretation, cultural awareness, and speaking. In a mixed level classroom, we do not always have to use a traditional AP assessment. But because we are in a mixed level course, sometimes there is a place for specific AP task preparation. Reporteros, all of the series of the Reporter series, and Generación AP are going to offer a lot of ready-made assessments that give students the opportunity to show how they're learning and their growth, and they're also going to set them up for success. An example from Reporteros 4, this is from the same essential question we looked at with the podcast project. They can also be assessed with an email or a simulated conversation on the topic, or you can also use the IPA that concludes the unit. While these tasks are a little bit more closely aligned to an AP assessment, they are moving away from the idea of rote memorization, and they are allowing our students to practice AP skills with demonstrating their skills and their knowledge in the target language. And even with an assessment, you could take some of Julianne's strategies and apply them to the assessment piece. You could scaffold the assessment before the students actually produce something to even the playing field, maybe for a non-AP student. And this is my last example. This is an example of an alternative assessment that you could use. This comes from Generación AP. This is probably one of my favorite sections of this book. It's called A Mitad de Camino. And I think this is going to be able to be used by teachers, both as a formative or a summative assessment, because it checks for the understanding and growth of the ideas of students for the first part of the unit. So this is what they're going to find halfway through the unit of Generación AP, and it lists the different essential questions that they have come into contact with. So remember, this is a formative assessment. It's meant to help build the confidence of our students, but you could take all of these questions and turn them into a traffic light activity. How well do you feel about being able to answer these questions? You could do a speed dating activity and have students move around the room as they are answering the essential question using a timer. You could do, again, 4 corners and have students move to different parts of the classroom to answer each of the essential questions in different ways. It's very easy, pre-made stuff that's already in the textbook, and all you have to do is tweak it a little bit to make it into an activity that promotes that collaborative and supportive classroom environment.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you both. Now we're getting to the end of our presentation, but before we jump into Q&A, we're going to do a quick recap. Go ahead to the next slide for me. Thank you. Thank you. So quick recap of what we discussed today. So using common themes with differentiation tasks upholds the rigor for all learners. Really important. Britt Marie and Julianne both showed some fantastic ways to differentiate, but still maintain that AP rigor, but play it down for those non-AP students. Scaffolding, super essential to ensure all students succeed. And scaffolding is important for every student across the board, not just for those non-AP students. Incorporating varied assessments, small group instruction, and project-based learning to meet diverse needs. So important and crucial. And like we've already discussed, our books have so many pre-made resources to make your lives a little bit easier. That's really our goal. And then finally, the resources that we showed tonight, Generación AP, Reporteros 4, and Reporter Francophone 4, they really provide built-in tools for teachers to be successful, save you time, and do what you do love, or do what you do best, is teach. So we hope you enjoyed tonight, and we're going to jump into some Q&A now. There's a Q&A feature at the very bottom of the screen. Feel free to type in some questions, and we'll see what we can do, what we can answer for you.
So far, I've been checking the questions. More than the question, we have like a request, someone who would like ideas for a mixed level class of French for honors with a French 2 level, AP French, French 5 honors. It's people who took the AP exam in 8th grade and will be going into IB French next year. So if you have any suggestions or if you think how could we apply the content that we just saw into this specific case?
That's a great question, and it reminds me of once again being given when I was a teacher that that mixed level class of French 3, 4, and AP. So it sounds like Juanita Rosa, you have a similar situation. You know, I would say, especially if you have you've got the French 4, the AP French, and French 5. One of the easy things that you could do is start with the middle level, which is that AP French. Have that be your baseline so that you can differentiate both up and down from that resource. Again, I think whenever you do have, if you have an AP population that you're trying to make sure is becoming prepared for the AP exam, I think incorporating AP tasks in, as part of the assessment, as part of your assessment program and learning is really helpful. And it does not have to be like doing tasks out of a AP workbook. A lot of the AP style tasks that you can do are, can be incorporated from any of the textbooks. So, and going into IB French next year, yeah, it's having any series that correlates to IB is super important. And at least I know for ours, we do have IB correlations for all of the reporter series and Mapas and Generacionate, I believe. So yeah, it sounds like it's a tough situation, Juanita. But I think maybe starting with that middle level, what the mean proficiency of the classes, and kind of going from there in both directions would be your best bet.
And I
Let's
saw, oh, sorry. I saw a
go
question
ahead. Go
come
ahead.
in about the fourth level, about, I guess, reportage francophone being an AP prep or pre-AP. It could be used either as an AP prep or an AP book, I think. Just really depends on your program, the sequence. I think it can be used in both ways in terms of how it's set up. Again, those great differentiation tasks that are embedded in it really make it work for both playing fields. Great question. As I'm trying to read, it keeps moving
I,
as the
I
chat's
can,
coming in.
yes, I
Yeah,
can answer a couple of questions. So first of all, in regards to samples, there are a few different ways that you can get samples. I believe there will be a link for getting samples. I
Just
don't
got
know.
posted. Yep.
Yes, perfect. And generally, if you request samples, it should just be a couple of days. I know somebody asked for samples of Reporter Team 2 and 3. I will say, coming out this summer is Das Reporter Team 1 and 2. The higher levels will be sequenced to come out next year. So right now, samples are only available for level 1 and 2. As for our release schedule, Generación AP will be released on June 15th, 2025. So less than 1 month. That is the date that we have for that. And then yes, is Reporter 4, oh, you already answered this, Laura. Yes, so
Okay.
the Reporter 4 is not an AP book, but it is aligned to the AP themes, tasks, and stimuli. So it can be used as an AP class or not an AP class. Let's see.
Let's see, one question by Joseph. Are there any online games that we can go to besides Kahoot, Blooket, and GimKit? Those are definitely my staples. Formative is a really great resource. It's not technically games, but it's a great way to see live what students are doing outside of a Google Doc. So Formative, really great there. I don't
I
know if anybody else has
I
ideas.
also used Flippity a lot.
Ooh,
It's
forgot about
a
Flippity.
It's kind of a repository of Google Doc-based activities that you can clone the template and then you can add your own information. You could create your own Jeopardies. You can create tons of different things. I used Flippity a lot when I was in the classroom, and it is free, or at least it was.
Yeah, I'm putting it in. I put two. Oh yeah, conjugamus, of course, man.
Oh, yeah.
That brings me back. That's an old school one. Love that. But put formative and then flippity.net in there. They're great. Um, yeah. And other questions?
I think we're good to go. So, again, thank you very much, girls, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.